This is Twit.
Apple and Samsung are back in court today. Apple is accusing Samsung of violating 5 patents. Samsung is accusing Apple of violating 2 patents. What's different this time is that 4 of the Apple patents are part of Google's Android. So if Apple wins the case, it could theoretically force Google to change Android for all handset makers, not just Samsung. Apple is seeking about $2 billion in damages. To discuss this issue, we have a couple of reporters. One is Brian X. Chen, who is a tech reporter for the New York Times. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
Glad you're here. And also Dan Rowinski, who is the mobile editor for Read Write. Welcome, Dan.
Hi.
So, Brian, who in your opinion has the stronger case in this particular patent case?
Well, it's tough to say. The trial has yet to start. One thing I would say is that Apple's going in here with sort of an advantage. Of the 5 patents that they brought into trial, the judge has already deemed one of them infringed by Samsung, so Samsung's already down one. And the other thing going for Apple is that they won the last trial, so I think among jurors there's always a chance that Apple might be able to persuade them that Samsung has violated their patents once again. But we have to wait till we see what happens throughout the trial over the next month.
Now, Dan, I think a lot of viewers and listeners might be forgiven for thinking, well, we just did this a couple of years ago in 2012. Didn't that settle the patent issues between Apple and Samsung?
Well, you think it would, but this is actually the second trial, as Brian noted, and this covers a whole new range of devices, including the Galaxy S3, which was probably the most popular Galaxy S smartphone at the time. So this is sort of just it's not a retrial, but it's the next trial for Apple to go after another round of Samsung devices.
Now, Brian, these are mostly user interface type things, and some of these issues, especially by Apple, sound like really basic functions. Like, for example, as I understand it, tapping on a link to go to another app or slide to unlock. These seem to me to be kind of basic, fundamental touch user interface elements that kind of shouldn't be patentable. What do you think?
I think it's going to be up to lawyers to argue this coming month about whether or not these features should be patentable. But these are pretty signature features of Apple's smartphones and tablets, and I think they chose these very specifically, looking to try to make some pretty dramatic modifications to Android. It's tough to say whether or not it's going to really dramatically change the Android experience if these were to be deemed infringed by Samsung, since there's so many thousands of features that make a smartphone work. But the judge limited each party to 5 patents, so this is what they brought to the fight. This is what they thought was important to them.
Now, Brian, you mentioned some high-level expert witnesses expected from Apple, Samsung, and Google. A little bit of star power in there. Who are you expecting to show up on the witness stand?
So I think the most interesting one to me is that Google is calling an Android executive named Hiroshi Lockheimer. He's a vice president for the Android division, and that's really interesting to me because Google's not even a defendant in this case. So it makes it even more clear that this fight is more about Google and Android than it is about Samsung, even though it's directly about Samsung. Other than Hiroshi, Apple is going to be calling Phil Schiller, the worldwide marketing executive for Apple, and Samsung is going to be calling Todd Pendleton, who's a chief marketing officer for Samsung.
Any chance Andy Rubin will be called?
Andy Rubin is the may call if necessary list, so that's always a kind of a maybe. It's sort of their last resort if they absolutely need to bring Andy Rubin into the trial. If you keep in mind, last time Scott Forstall was also part of the trial, or he was supposed to be, he was on the may call if necessary list, but he was never called. He's also on the list again this time. So these are the 2 big maybes, these pretty important executives for Apple and Google.
Now, what is the worst case scenario, Dan, in all of this? Is there any chance that any products will be blocked from sale? Is that even a possibility after this case?
I don't really think so this time around. Apple tried to get injunctions against Samsung from the last case, and those didn't really stick. And overall, Apple has had a hard time getting injunctions to stick against Samsung at all. It had some success against HTC a couple years ago. It has had success overseas. But in the US, it's really hard to get injunctions and have them stick for a long period of time. This is really a lot about pride and profit for Apple. So they're looking for $40 per device here, but the actual injunction against devices probably won't stick. And the fact that these are older devices, Samsung Galaxy S3 is now, the 2 iterations behind, it's not really going to affect the consumer all that much.